or freezing of accounts made pursuant to the ICPC Act, the Drug Law Enforcement Agency Act, the EFCC Act, Advanced Fee Fraud and Other Related Offences Act, they are not in conflict with the Constitution, the right, the presumption of innocence, or the right to property. These are very important landmark pronouncements that support the soft law angle of civil forfeiture. Number 3, the Supreme Court affirmed that the Advanced Fee Fraud and Other Related Offences Act were enacted in line with the UN Convention Against Corruption. Because some defendants have gone to court to challenge that this is antithetical and that Nigeria should not have acceded. And of course, the courts have dismissed that Nigeria is part of the international community, and we have an obligation when we say to other parts of the world that we will comply with certain standards to do so. Much more importantly, recently, I'm talking of 2 months ago, Nigeria's National Assembly recently passed the Proceeds of Crime Act that takes the use of non-conviction-based asset forfeiture beyond reasonable doubt, and it affirms the judicial position. Even though the courts had ruled, some people would still test the court, and some lower courts would, what we term judicial rascality, would ignore the precedent of the higher court and try and argue their way out of, look for loopholes. Some will say you still have to prove that this fellow, first of all, and I'm going to talk about it when I look at the benefits. When you take civil forfeiture action, you are not alleging that anybody is a criminal. You are not saying somebody has stolen money. Constitutional liberties are not at risk. It's an action against the property. And some courts would say, oh, since you've mentioned his name, then he has a right to defend himself. You are alleging he has done something wrong. And so you've moved beyond civil forfeiture. You've moved to the realm of crime and allegation, even though you did not file a charge. You filed an ex parte application and all that. So by this Proceeds of Crime Act, which we're waiting for the concurrence of the second chamber of our National Assembly, and we have no doubt that it will be passed, the legislature has put beyond reasonable doubt that once, that first of all, we can file civil forfeiture to recover assets. Secondly, once the allegation is made, the burden shifts. The burden shifts. You have to then respond and prove. The third point, or the final point here, is that to succeed effectively here, you need the digital infrastructure, which the Attorney General has mentioned. For you to trace the assets properly, you must have the records and all that of citizens, registration of assets, whether it is land, access to records in the banks. You must, if you have a financial intelligence unit or center, it makes things easier. So you've done all of this background research. In Nigeria, the anti-corruption agencies, we have access to, view-only access to quite a number of these databases through some of the digital technology that had been introduced in the country to fight corruption, like the bank verification numbers. Everybody who owns an account must have a BVN, and it's a biometric-driven BVN. So if you have 200 accounts, and you'll be surprised, we have suspects who have up to 200 accounts. They open different accounts in different banks, in different names, but the unique identifier is always the BVN number, because the bank, and once you have one, you cannot do a second one, because it's accompanied by your biometrics and all that. So once you put in a suspect's name and BVN number, even if they are using aliases in 500 other places, everything will be aggregated under one record. And you can tell that this same person is holding an account in different banks in different names. Then, of course, the same thing with vehicles. We have access to, for example, the portal for the registration of vehicles. So if a suspect registered, or a public servant registers a Rolls Royce and obtains a number plate, you can just flag it. And they have not declared it in their asset declaration form. You can flag it. As a public servant, how are you able to afford a Rolls Royce that costs $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, and what have you? So what are the benefits of non-conviction-based recovery? The first is speed. It's speed. suspects capitalize on the slow pace of criminal justice administration, generally, globally. This is not just an African problem. And obviously, part of their desire, especially with regard to asset recovery, is to be able to make profit out of their crime, to live a life of luxury ever after. And while you are prosecuting cases in court, they dissipate the assets. They can transfer it. They can convert it. Assets can be converted to a work of art. Somebody buys a Da Vinci painting that costs $10 million. Law enforcement enter the house. You see everything. You want to seize a Mercedes-Benz. You want to seize jewelry. But you leave a painting on the wall. That painting costs $200 million. They convert it. They buy exotic animals and keep. And when you are doing your tracing, you don't trace to some of those things. Besides the common practices that we know of buying houses, yachts, private jets, cars, and of course, you know the recent one, they buy digital currencies, cryptocurrency, and get a wallet which you have no access to, and the anonymity in the cryptocurrency world just simply aligns. So, as anti-corruption agencies, we need to innovate. So the first thing that you get is speed. You are able to take away what they cannot prove. Secondly, because usually one of the defenses is that I'm innocent until proven guilty. So you prove me guilty. And they do everything to make sure that you don't have that standard of the burden of proof. So in civil forfeiture, the liberty of the person in possession of the asset is not an issue. And it does not offend any fundamental rights or constitutional safeguard. So we're not saying you are a thief. We're saying you are very smart. We don't know how you took this asset, but we can deduce from all the income available to you that this cannot possibly be your asset. There's a mistake somewhere here. And so the state is going to take this asset away. Number 3, as I've said, the proceeding is against the person, is against the property, not the person. Number 4 is that proof is on the balance of probabilities. It's not proof beyond reasonable doubt. It's balance of probability. Has the prosecution been able to show that it is unlikely that a public servant on an annual salary of $1,000 or $10,000 can afford an asset of $2 million? The chances are 0. Number 5, it reverses the burden of proof. Once the state says, given your stated income and the tax that you have been paying to the state, because if you are the owner of this 200 million worth asset, you would have been paying commensurate tax. And if you have not been paying the tax, it means that this is surely not your asset and all that. The burden is reversed. Number 5, it guarantees the ease of asset recovery because it takes the profit out of the crime, thereby promoting deterrence. Because one of the intentions of the suspect is to be able to live a life of luxury. Especially for those in public office, they want to steal in advance as much money as they need for a blissful retirement. So one of the things that asset recovery does is to remove that illusion of a life by the beach in the Bahamas, somewhere there. Civil forfeiture is advantageous in countries with dysfunctional criminal justice system. Many African countries, our criminal justice system is highly dysfunctional. I mean, in Nigeria, there are criminal cases that go on for 10 years. I don't know about other countries. By the time the cases end, sometimes the court will order a retrial. It will mean that you have to start all over again. Witnesses are probably dead. Records might have disappeared. There's prosecution fatigue. And you've spent so much money to prosecute over a 10-year period. So the criminal justice system is dysfunctional in the name of trying to make sure that it is better for 200 guilty people to go free than for one innocent man to be convicted. I'm sure you all remember that case. So everybody is careful, but with civil forfeiture, you can take away the benefit. Dispossession of illicit wealth from criminals is sufficient punishment to dissuade other people, because it takes the profit out of crime. And finally, it does not prevent later prosecution of suspect. For example, in Nigeria, sometimes the suspects are better resourced than the state in legal representation. They get senior lawyers and they can get 10 of them. Lawyers that are very, very expensive. And the state is only represented by one state counsel or maybe two. They may even be middle level. When you look at the legal representation in court, there's psychological intimidation. And one of the reasons for that is that the state has been weakened. Many of our public services don't pay as well as the private sector. So the suspect is using stolen money to get solid legal representation. So if you can weaken that suspect by first of all taking away all that money that he wants to use to hire plenty of lawyers, then you equalize the game when you want to prosecute. He doesn't have the money to pay them. And the lawyers, as we know, many of us here are lawyers. Lawyers are sharks. You can't pay, they abandon you. What are the limitations of asset recovery? Some people have questioned the utility of non-conviction-based asset recovery, and that it can be muted where the offender remains in public office and has the opportunity to accumulate more illicit assets. This is a real fear. If, for example, the person is in public office, if you don't get a conviction, it's a conviction that gets rid of them. At least in Nigeria, for example, if you are convicted, you cannot hold public office at least for another 10 years. And of course, it costs you your job immediately. So if there is no conviction, you recover the asset. Some people have argued that the fellow can stay put and evaluate what mistakes he made and then use his presence in public office to reloot by avoiding the pitfalls of the first time. That's a fair argument. Secondly, where all illicit assets are not traced, retention of other assets undermines public confidence, which is again true. Some of our countries are not fully digital or technologically wired up, so that it is very easy for people to hold assets that are not registered in their name and not traceable to them at all. It is only recently that we have started a conversation about beneficial ownership. Indeed, for the first time in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, in December last year, Nigeria pushed with others a resolution on beneficial ownership disclosure. For the first time ever. This had always been resisted mostly by Western countries. So that with beneficial ownership, and we have amended our laws and are introducing the digital infrastructure, even if you use a nominee to register a company that is holding assets, it will be traced back to you. Then, number 3 is that public perception is that non-conviction-based recovery without imprisonment is not fully deterrent of wrongful conduct. However, for those of us who are on the field, we know that the data and the experience tell us that in democratic systems, especially those with criminal justice administration, non-conviction-based recovery gives the state some leverage. So let me quickly round up. What should we be doing in our countries? First, I think that AU member countries, all of us are AU member countries, we should implement the Common African Position on Asset Recovery standards. The Common African Position on Asset Recovery was adopted in February 2020 by the AU heads of government in Addis. Nigeria was very much instrumental to pushing this document, and I participated. I had the privilege of participating in that process. Indeed, did the first draft of the CAPA, which was robustly debated and finally was adopted. And it gives us 5 major pillars. We deal with some of the issues raised by the Attorney General. First of all, we must improve capacity for detection and identification of assets. You can only recover what you know is there and where it is hiding and how it is mutated. Secondly, we must have framework for recovery and return. Return both local and international, where the assets are outside jurisdiction. We must have a robust framework for management and utilization of recovered assets for public good. There's a lot of cynicism, both in Africa, developing countries generally, and even in developed countries, that when you recover assets, what do you use it for? And so, the cheek of it, some developed countries who are holding stolen assets will also be throwing and say, well, they are not denying that this asset belongs to you, but they are saying, oh, if you recover it, if we give it back to you, what are you going to use it for? We say that's our sovereign right. This has been Nigeria's position. That's our sovereign right. First of all, you are holding stolen assets. If you want to know for record what our plans are, that's a different issue. But if you make it a condition for return, we say it's a violation of sovereignty. And we've always made that argument very forcefully, even though we would then also indicate for the need of the public what returned assets are going to be used for. And it also helps the government as well to reduce the propensity for relooting. Number 4, cooperation and partnerships, which the Attorney General also alluded to. Very important, because without mutual legal assistance treaties, you cannot extradite suspects. You cannot even take legal action in your country and request that it be used, for example, to restrain assets abroad. For example, in Nigeria, once we traced an asset to someone, we can get a Mareva order, injunction, which is a global restraining order against a suspect to say, we know you have some assets here in Nigeria, you have some in point B, but we don't know where else you have assets. We get that order, and in every country where we suspect that you have assets, we can serve them the order so that any asset in the name of that suspect is restrained. Only very few countries do not recognize such orders. Even in the United States, some states recognize Mareva injunction, some states of the US do not, because of their federal structure. But at least it helps you, because many times law enforcement does not even know the extent of what we're dealing with. And so you need to take preemptive measures. Then, of course, it covers cross-cutting issues such as protection of whistleblowers, capacity building, etc. Second thing that we should be doing is that we should be implementing the low-hanging fruits from the Thabo Mbeki panel report. As many of us know, the African Union set up the Thabo Mbeki panel around 2013 or thereabouts. It has submitted a report titled Trace, Track, and Get It. Track it, stop it, and get it back. Track, stop, get it back. In other words, look for the assets that have been stolen. Stop the opportunities for the stealing. Get back what has been stolen. Track, stop, get it back. So, and the start-off point is to have a specialized asset forfeiture and recovery unit in our countries. Very important. Focused, if we're going to meet the Sustainable Development Goals and all of the conversation about domestic resource mobilization, asset recovery must be central to the work of anti-corruption agencies. Then, of course, comply with the AUCPCC provisions by providing all of the required information in compliance with the Executive Council decision of the AU, designating a national authority that will criminalize all acts of corruption. Thirdly, be ready to combine diplomatic, civil, and criminal forfeiture mechanisms for asset recovery, not just diplomatic measures. I go to international meetings sometimes, and colleagues from other countries are telling me, oh, well, they have to appeal to this country. Appeal alone does not work. It is in the interest of the recipient country to keep the assets in their country. So you have to adopt a combination of measures. While your ministers and heads of government are meeting, you are filing an action in court, both internationally and domestically, to show that you are serious. To show that you are serious. And then, of course, you have to involve civil society, the media, in advocacy for asset recovery and asset return. Because if you don't let them know what you're doing and get their voice, there's a lot of cynicism at the government-to-government level, whether it is in Africa or elsewhere. But once civil society and media know what is going on and they take up the advocacy, you wipe returns, almost totaling over $500 million that we've succeeded, and we are in conversation to recover and return a bit more. The frustration, part of the frustration here is the multiple legal systems that you have to deal with when you want to return assets from outside jurisdiction. The parameters are not uniform, they are not clear, and they are as different as there are countries where your asset is traceable to. I think that one of the things that we should be doing as African countries is to demand transparent parameters, where necessary, a timetable for asset return, including the return of stolen artifacts. Nigeria has succeeded in the past 24 months to have a number of stolen artifacts returned to the country, and we are unrelenting, totally unrelenting in this pursuit. Otherwise, what you have is musical chairs. You just dance around the issues. You've been negotiating for 10 years, and you don't get anything, and the value of the asset you want to recover is diminishing. Number two there, advocate an application of common standards of governance on the use of returned assets. As I said, one of the criticisms against African countries is that returned assets tend to be relooted. There's no framework about how you are going to deal with it. When you return asset during a budget or fiscal year, extra money that comes in is just money to be shared, because it was not captured in your budget, and so it can be abused. We should have a framework that puts this beyond doubt for the global community to see. And then apply common standards of simultaneous demand for sanctions against the principal actors, especially middlemen and the facilitators of corruption, both in requesting, that's our countries, and the requested states, that's the other states. Because right now, the facilitators allow this to happen. And many of our countries have not achieved the framework. Again, Nigeria is pushing very hard that whether you are a bank, an accounting firm, a law firm, a real estate agency, once you facilitate any of these, you are as culpable as the principal. You are as culpable as the principal. That's the way to diminish this. My conclusion: non-conviction based recovery is a potent tool for the denial of the fruits of wrongdoing as well as the recovery of illicit wealth. There's no doubt about it. And civil forfeiture is a viable alternative to criminal forfeiture because of its timeliness. Anti-corruption agencies need to improve the capacity in investigation, especially asset tracing, to ensure the maximum impact of non-conviction asset forfeiture. It is suggested that efforts should be made to capacitate anti-corruption agencies to improve on investigation and prosecution alongside with civil forfeiture. And serious efforts should be made to address the dysfunctional criminal justice system in many of our countries. Improved public education is also required on the utility of civil forfeiture to anti-corruption efforts. This to remove that cynicism that it is a trade-off like any other trade-off. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Bolaji. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a very interesting presentation, asset recoveries presentations, the two of them. We are very grateful to Emmanuel and Bolaji for their ideas and their insights. I have a friend who always tells me, I have never killed anybody, but I have read so many obituaries with great pleasure. So we are here between lunch and you, and we would not want you to read our obituaries with great pleasure. We will ask, perhaps we can open the floor, Roya, for two quick questions, interventions, reactions. There are very interesting ideas that have been shared on asset recovery. And with this, I would like to ask if there are one or two ideas, interventions, questions, comments you want to put across before we break for lunch, and the country presentations, I understand, have been moved to the afternoon. And yes, there is a hand here in Lesotho. Perhaps a microphone, yeah, microphone is coming. Fantastic, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen, for the excellent presentations that you made. In actual fact, one has quite a number of questions, but I'll try to generalize them and limit them. From both presentations, what has come to the fore is that there are jurisdictional problems as far as the issue of extradition and the use of the CAPA standards is concerned. I just would like to know from both countries what's stopping us, because by us I mean the whole Commonwealth countries, from using the United Nations Convention Against Corruption as a basis for extradition, because clearly from time immemorial it has been, it's apparent that having a common legislation, it's a problem. Why can't we use the United Nations as a basis? The second one is whether both countries each one has policies regarding the disposal of those assets after they have been now legally and lawfully forfeited. Because that is another source of corruption when you don't have policies and transparent policies on the disposal of those assets. Okay, I think having said that, maybe I'll reserve the others and come later.
Excellent, thanks a lot. So two very interesting points, jurisdiction and disposal of assets policies. Any other question or comment, and we take them together, or we go, yes, here in front. Microphone, please. Exactly, here. Coming to...
Thank you very much, presenters. Very, very captivating presentations. My name is Betty Kamyam from Uganda. And my question is, as we tighten the noose around illicit wealth in the ways that you have proposed or explained, I see that they are a step ahead in terms of cryptocurrency and the other methods of hiding a lot of wealth, like that wall painting and the strange animals that you talked about. We can work hard and tighten the noose on all these other methods. But what can we do to nip in the bud the other steps where they're ahead? Because clearly, when we catch up with this one, then there'll be a step ahead with the cryptocurrencies. When do we start working on this? Thank you.
Very good question from Betty. Botswana as a follow-up question, and then we will allow the presenters to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and let me also thank the two presenters for such an informative presentation. My question goes to my colleague from Nigeria. You have mentioned that one of the problems for disposing of cases is prolonged proceedings, judicial proceedings. And the same is also the case in Botswana. And we have realized that this sometimes, or in majority of cases, it is as a result of interlocutory applications. So my question is, how do you deal with such situations, if at all you have a strategy to deal with such situations? Thank you very much.
Excellent. So we have had 4 interventions, or rather 3 interventions, 4 questions, 4 points. I will allow now the presenters to respond. Perhaps, Honorable Minister, we can start with you.
Thank you very much. I do think there are certain questions which were general for both panelists and then specific ones. So the first one on jurisdiction, why don't we rely on the United Nations Convention Against Corruption as a basis for extradition? I do agree that it could be used as a basis for extradition, but the challenges that you face sometimes is when you present your case to another country, which is a member state of the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption, once in a while you are told that that country has not domesticated this convention, so it cannot be applied in their domestic legal setting. So that's one of the challenges that we do come across when we try to apply the convention, even though the convention is much more clear and it gives you a basis for extradition. But that's one of the areas that we've faced as a challenge. The second one is we all do know that international law, even as a course in the faculties of law, schools of law, is a very new subject area. So some of the judges in domestic courts don't want to hear anything to do with international treaties. They want to see a domestic law which was passed by their own national parliaments. And this is why we do think that bilateral treaties on extradition or even mutual legal assistance will be much more helpful than these international bodies or conventions. Then on the question of disposal of the assets, I do agree with you that it can be another source of corruption or even illicit flow. We've seen instances where you've done everything, you've reached at that level where asset has been recovered. When you want to auction it, for example, you run a risk of the same people purchasing the property that is being disposed of at even a cheaper price if you're not careful. So that's why in Rwanda, when it comes to disposal, we again thought that technology will be very helpful. And we now have a system called e-auction, where whenever you want to dispose of any asset, it has to go through an e-auction system where a lot of scrutiny takes place to ensure that corruption will not be able to affect the auctioning or disposal of these assets. And once the proceeds have been recovered, they go to the national coffers for the proceeds to be allocated to where they are supposed to be allocated, where they were supposed to be allocated in the first instance. On the question of new ways that are applied in order to really seal the traces of corruption, such as cryptocurrency, purchasing of well painting, yes, we try to tighten the rules, but the more you try to tighten the rules, the more the evaders also do invent new ways of evading the law. And one way of dealing with new ways that are invented by those who engage in corruption is to ensure that you come up with a system which allows for reward for those who give you information. And one of these ways is to give a certain percentage as a reward to someone who gives you this information. And at times it will be, don't be surprised, sometimes family members, when you've had one too many bottles of beer, and then you reveal to your close circles about how you've been able to evade justice by these new technologies, then one of them may be able to give you information because there's a reward attached to this. Otherwise, if you don't have a stick and carrot system in the fight or in the combat of corruption, then it becomes extremely difficult. So this is one way that you keep at par, giving rewards to those who give you information, especially the much needed information that you don't have. And then I do think these are the general questions. The other one was directed to my colleague, Prof.
Thank you very much. I agree in total, as they say, with the position taken by the Attorney General. It's very difficult to just use a multilateral treaty as the basis for engagement on a bilateral issue. A multilateral treaty will give you a broad framework, which when you have a bilateral negotiation between the parties, you can narrow things down. Some people will agree to something at the multilateral level, generally as the principles to guide it, but when it comes to the bilateral issue, they want more specifics. So that's one of the reasons why, apart from the fact that the courts would also say, this is not necessarily a self-executing treaty. You know, in international law, there are self-executing and non-self-executing treaties. Some treaties, whether or not, once you are part of it, whether or not you domesticate it, it is enforced against you. Some, you need to domesticate it in order for the enforcement measures to be taken. And with corruption, there are other issues with regard to designating, collection of evidence, for example, designating a central authority and identifying who state parties can deal with. Some of these are not necessarily taken care of in the multilateral treaty. Now, on the question about the need for policy, I agree absolutely. Indeed, this is one of the areas that anti-corruption agencies are blackmailed of abusing recovered assets. Even what has been recovered is exaggerated. And regrettably, many of us who don't keep good records, you have to start defending yourself that no, it's not true, this is what we recovered, and so on. In Nigeria, for example, because of this sort of criticism, government set up an interagency committee which has representatives of anti-corruption agencies, is under the office of the Attorney General. All recovered assets, if it is cash, it is in a recovery account, which the Accountant General of the Federation can see. That recovery account is the Central Bank of Nigeria. None of the anti-corruption agencies can spend the money without somebody seeing it, because the process is digitized. And if it's a physical asset, you keep a record. In my office, there's a monthly reconciliation. And you keep a record and we forward it to the interagency committee, which then advertises the disposal, enables, appoints auctioneers, and enables the general public to bid so that the government can get the best value and all that. These are ways in which, and this is a very important step to take, because it's one of the excuses given by those who receive stolen assets for not wanting to return it. Say, if we return this asset, we are sure it is going to be relooted, it's going to be misapplied. But once you have a transparent framework which can be monitored, you don't have to defend, because it can be very embarrassing when you are in a negotiation to say my stolen asset is in your country and you are being asked, if we return it, how are you going to use it? I mean, that can be very annoying, you know. So, but once you have a clear policy that shows what you will do, you don't need, people have already done their research, and you make sure that that policy itself speaks for you. So I agree absolutely. What we've done in Nigeria with the new process of crime legislation is to make it a statutory framework. Before now, when I was in the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, before I assumed office here, the first strategy that we developed in 2016 was, in 2015, December, beg your pardon, was an asset recovery policy, which tried to take care of some of these gaps and all that. So I admit that beyond policy, if you can have a legal framework, it helps to remove suspicion. The third point about how do we deal with emergent areas of corruption and new methods that are used by suspects. The truth of the matter is that corruption is a moving target. The traditional methods of crime are also being impacted by development in technology and all that. So what states and anti-corruption agencies must do is that we must not be static. We have to always be forward-looking. Apart from incentives like the whistleblowers, we have to have constant training for operatives. What I was sharing about hiding tons of money in works of art, how many of us appreciate a work of art that is an original from a master? Nobody. But it was from a capacity building program that I attended many years ago, that you have to train operatives to look beyond looking for the exotic car, looking for cash, looking for a house, to look for other things. I used the example of the animal. I was told that there are white snakes that are so very expensive. Some people collect them, white snakes. They are priceless in some jurisdictions. And some criminals just invest in white snakes. So if you go to the house, do you want to recover snakes? No. You want to live, in fact, you want to avoid the snakes. And you say you didn't get anything. You file a report, boss, there was nothing there. But the billions was in the crawling serpent that you left back in the house. So I think that capacity building, this sort of interaction where we learn from each other, peer learning, apart from incentivizing and all that. We also have a whistleblower policy in Nigeria, which was developed when I was also at the Presidential Advisory Committee, and it gives 5% of whatever cash recovery to the whistleblower as an incentive, and it has helped move the fight forward. The last question about how do you deal with this delay in the criminal justice system, which is usually caused by interlocutory applications. What we did in Nigeria was to respond by legislation, to say, eliminate all, you are not allowed to appeal. If you have an interlocutory application, the court will take it, the ruling, with the conclusion of the proceedings. In other words, the fellow wants to challenge the court, and the court rules against the suspect appeals. You are not allowed to appeal. You are not allowed to appeal. Administration of Criminal Justice Act 2015. Now, in spite of, and there are many other innovations that we have there, but in spite of that, it tries to limit the number of adjournments, for example, to 5. It tries to limit the length of time between adjournments, for example. But the courts have pushed back, regrettably, and resisted some of these innovations. For example, the courts have argued that, oh, they are overworked. So why would you, by legislation, tell them that if you are adjourning a criminal case, a corruption case now, maximum is 14 days. So they can adjourn it for the next 6 months. I will say, this is inimical to development, my lord. He said, well, my docket is full. And what can you do? Indeed, we had an innovation, for example, whereby politically exposed persons who are very powerful, when they see that the case is not going according to plan and they are likely to be convicted, they can orchestrate the promotion or the elevation of the judge during the case, so that the judge gets elevated from the high court to an appellate court. That means the case will start afresh. And the case has been going on for 10 years. So we agreed in that statute to say that where a judge has been taking a case and is elevated to an appellate court, you can have a special dispensation that allows the judge to be given a fiat to finish the case, okay, even though he has been elevated. You will not believe it, that last year the Supreme Court said that provision was unconstitutional, that once the judge has been elevated, he cannot sit, even though the EFCC, our sister agency, have a case whereby the suspect was the one who said, I don't mind this judge coming back to finish the case. So we're back to square one. So the Supreme Court is insisting that we have to make it a constitutional provision in order for it to work. So this is some of the pushback that we've had. But we've had some successes, so it's mixed blessings, basically, in dealing with this challenge. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Bolaji. It's clear to everyone here in the room, I think, that the challenges can be summarized as legal, strategic, and political. And if one of them flops, the whole enterprise may collapse. I am extremely grateful to all of you for the good interventions, for your attention. Honorable Minister Emmanuel UGIRASHEBUJA, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Rwanda, thank you very much for your valuable insight. The same goes to Chair Bolaji of the ICPC. And here we have had a successful country giving us their experiences, and a country that represents the great majority of Africa, because out of every 6 Africans, almost 2 are Nigerians. So if we get this together, we have the right mixture to, as we began saying, strangle corruption out of Africa. Thank you very much. It is clear that we cannot guarantee success, but we guarantee failure by giving up. You are all welcome for lunch. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, whilst we just want to also thank Professor Louis Franceschi for abling steering this interesting panel discussion. Thank you, Prof. As he has mentioned, we're going to go straight to lunch. We are far behind time and schedule, but let's go and eat first. When we come back, we will sort out the way forward. I'm sure they will direct us to where the lunch is. We're supposed to have 1 hour lunch. Let's see how that goes. We come back, we continue up to a point where it's about 5:30 when we have to knock off. We will make adjustment as we go along. I know some of the presentation may not happen because 1 or 2 have dropped out as we go along, so we will make adjustment. However, when we come from lunch, we're going to continue with Botswana and Cameroon presentation, and the chair will be Uganda. So get ready after lunch. We will continue with that presentation. Thank you very much. As you know, if you've been to conferences and training programs, you know that this period is a very difficult period because you have a problem. If you have a heavy lunch plus air-conditioned room, the answer is what? Heavy lunch plus air-conditioned room is equal to sleeping. Anyway, we'll ask the afternoon snack to come early so that if you get some coffee or tea to keep you awake. But without much ado, we're going to start because we are behind time. So I'm going to call upon the chair, who is from Uganda. Uganda is chairing this section. If you want to step forward. Is Uganda in the room? Or is still at lunch break? I've forgotten that Uganda is here. Honorable Betty, you are chairing. and Cameroon. Uganda is just Che, so we sit in the middle. Yeah. Then the side Cameroon and Botswana. Yeah. So we're going to have Botswana and Cameroon doing their country report. So Botswana and Cameroon, if we are here, you can come and take your seats. We're waiting for Cameroon and Botswana to come to the podium, to come and take your seats. Madam Chair, each of them will have 20 minutes. So you have to be strict on time. 20 minutes each. Please make sure the speaker, the mic is not working.
Is the mic on? This is
Yeah, next.
What's the name?
So the timing is important, 20 minutes each. If after 20 minutes they have not finished, please cut them off. So that and then there will be maybe about 10 minutes for question and answers. So, Madam Chair.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
You're not hearing me? Oh, okay. Did you enjoy your lunch? You did? Yes, I saw some of you really enjoying it, as I was enjoying my own. Now, welcome to the afternoon session. And in this afternoon session, we are going to receive presentations from Botswana and Cameroon. And from Botswana, we are privileged to have the Director General on corruption, Mr. Tamin Katanolo. And he's a very esteemed gentleman. He's a former member of the DCEC who retired in 2009, but because of his good works which remained in the institution, he was recalled in 2020. I think that's a very big statement for which he deserves a big hand, a big clap. We are also going to have a presentation from Professor Anukaha Francis, who is the Vice Chairman of the National Anti-Corruption Commission of Cameroon, which is, in short, is CHRAJ. He's also a very distinguished honorary dean of the Faculty of Laws, university teacher. He's a university teacher. He has a wealth of experience and knowledge, and we shall be very glad to listen to him for 20 minutes. May I now invite our speaker from Botswana to talk to us for 20 minutes.
Thank you.
Receive your country presentation for 20 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say for now that all protocols observed. I'm going to share with you our country paper on how we are performing in Botswana. I think listening to all the speakers this morning, I don't think I'll be wrong to say that our problems are similar, even though we come from different geographical locations. So for our part, as the Directorate, what I'm going to present to you highlights the activities of the Directorate that we undertook pursuant to our mandate of a three-pronged strategy against corruption, which is public education, prevention, and investigation. And also indicate that we have looked at that strategy because we have used it for a very long time. And quite recently, we have refocused the strategy to now make it more performance-based, where we focused or infused performance-based measures into our corruption strategies. This is consistent with our national vision, and more recently, the reset agenda by His Excellency, the President. So when you look at the strategy, what they are simply saying is that if you want to kill corruption almost instantaneously, raise your performance bar. Just raise your performance bar. Because as you do that, you minimize opportunities for corruption. Because what corruption fears most is the truth. What corruption fears most is integrity. What corruption fears most is compliance to principles. So once you leverage on those performance-based tools, then corruption becomes very weak. So the effect of the strategy is simply to weaken corruption through efficient and effective and prudent management systems, and also effective implementation of policies and programs. Like I said, excellence in service delivery and high levels of productivity reduce corruption to almost non-existent. So the result that you get is what? Zero corruption and positive impact on national development programs. So this approach is deliberate, given that corruption can and continues to impact negatively on the country's economy, and thus constitute the major hindrance to our socio-economic development and sustainable realization of our legitimate aspirations, which is prosperity for all. So which are these tools that I'm talking about? We are talking about total quality management, result-based monitoring and evaluation, risk and assessment and management, and last but not least, the outreach programs. So, when you look at these programs, why are they effective and we believe they are very effective. It is because they are proactive in nature and are deliberately designed to augment another strategy that we have adopted, which is parallel investigation. So what do we mean in parallel investigation? We pursue the assets simultaneously as we pursue the predicate offense. So why do we have to do that? Because we have also, like many other countries, now switched on to the non-conviction forfeitures non-conviction forfeitures. So that is where we find this becoming very, very effective. As we speak, I think we have assets in the region of, 3 million that we have seized in Botswana through assets forfeiture. So, again, what we have realized so that we come up with this strategy, and I think you'll all agree with me that research has proved that reliance on the police as the only institution to rely upon to combat corruption has failed. That is why in many countries now you have anti-corruption agencies. But similarly, reliance on anti-corruption agencies as the only institution responsible for combating corruption has of late proven to be inefficient. So, consistent with the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, we have also come up with a strategy that is all-inclusive to embrace other sectors like civil society, the private sector, and et cetera, et cetera. So such approach, like I said, we have the public sector on the other side, we have civil society on the other side, and then we have the general public, all working together towards combating corruption. But like I said, the emphasis is on what? Is on raising the performance bar. This approach, this is the approach that the DCEC modeled its corruption strategy on, which approach inter alia infuse ethics and integrity in the management of systems, in the management systems of organizations, and also to enhance the fight against corruption. So that the approach is intended to infuse corruption prevention mechanism, the economic spectrum. So another approach that we have adopted, we are saying that everything falls or rises on leadership. So we are concentrating on leadership development to inculcate that ethical behavior in leadership. Ethical leadership is premised on a philosophical moral foundation of the attitude. We're looking at the attitude of the leadership, and that is what we are working on, especially in the decision-making processes. Because without moral foundation, so decision can be influenced by anything, can be determined by circumstances. You have a situation whereby no, when no is supposed to be no, it is, it can be changed to yes, just depending on the circumstances because of lack of a moral foundation. So, consequently, we believe that the fight against corruption must begin from the leadership angle, which demonstrate the political will, good governance and promotion of integrity, and good ethical behavior. And for our purpose, we believe that everyone in the structure of government is a leader in their own rights. So what is the current corruption status in Botswana? A bird's eye view of the newspapers and the social media suggests that corruption is on the rise in Botswana. I can confirm that, yes, indeed, that is the case. Of course, this assessment is not based on the allegations or the reports that we receive from members of the public. Because when you look at the reports, starting from 2014 to now, we have actually realized a decline. But our observation is based on the amount of money involved and the sophistication of corruption as it manifests in money laundering activities. I must also highlight here that the DCEC, as a law enforcement, we have a mandate on money laundering. So that is why we have this parallel investigation strategy, where we pursue the predicate on one hand and also pursue the assets. On the issue of the decline in the numbers, we are not just simply convinced that, yes, maybe we are making an impact. We are also worried that maybe the public is losing confidence in the way we handle corruption. And if that is the case, that is not too good enough. But of course, if that is the case, then we can say that we are making some very good positive inroads in terms of our strategy. But it's something that we are still observing very, very carefully. What challenges do we have? Yes, I'll just mention one because there are many. ICT is one of the challenges that we have in combating corruption. We have not yet embraced ICT to that level where we can maximize or leverage on it most effectively. So that is one area that we need to improve. But in terms of the laws, I think we have sufficiently covered all or most of the laws that are needed to combat corruption. So in conclusion, I would like to echo the sentiments of the other presenters and colleagues who presented before me, that collaboration with one another is key, and without which then there is no way that we can defeat corruption. So despite our jurisdiction, our legislative frameworks and our jurisdictional frameworks, I think we need to explore those opportunities where we need to collaborate with each other. I should be able to pick up a phone in Botswana and call a colleague here in Rwanda to say that, hey, look, I have one or two things. Meanwhile, I'm following the diplomatic channels or the formal communication channels. Can you check one or two things? And then that can be done, and that should be able to facilitate our work. So with those few remarks, Madam Chair, let me rest my case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Botswana, I think he deserves another hand clap because of his 20 minutes, he used 15. So we've saved some 5 minutes. And I hope you are listening intently because Botswana is ranked as the 3rd least corrupt country in Africa and having scored 55% on the Corruption Perception Index, which is very good for Africa. I think they deserve a hand clap. That was in 2021, last year. Thank you, Botswana. Please reserve your questions. Now, we are going to listen to a presentation from Cameroon, from Professor Anukaha. Professor, your microphone. It's dropped 49. You dropped 49.
No, we dropped to 50. We are 61.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, that is very good. I just Googled it.
So we dropped one. Okay, I think the PowerPoint presentation is there. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I stand here on behalf of Reverend Dr. Masingams Dieudonné, the chairperson of National Anti-Corruption of Cameroon, who was a little ill and asked me to come and represent here our institution. So I'm a new face for today, as Corentin was looking yesterday for new faces. But I'm not so new because I know that apart the fact that the Reverend Dr. Masingams, which whom we have been since 2011, apart the fact that we are fighting corruption together in Cameroon, we have a physical outcome. I think I look everyone in this hall. Maybe Reverend Dr. Masingams and I have black has white, no black, white hairs. I think we are always with white hairs in this hall. So, thank you. Before delivering the country paper, permit me, Mr. Chair, to give a few notions in brief concerning my country, Cameroon. Cameroon is situated, I forgot, please. Cameroon is situated in Central Africa, about 25 million inhabitants, and Cameroon is usually called as Africa in miniature because its geographical position into the Gulf of Guinea and cultural diversity. So, as Cameroon is a long coastline, it has forest reserve, beautiful mountains, wide plains, dry and sandy desert, and vast grass-fed white savanna. In Cameroon, we have two official languages. We speak French and English. Aside those two official languages, there are about 250 national languages representing a considerable number of tribes. Cameroon, as we know, is a member of the Commonwealth, both because of its bilateral system too. Cameroon is a member of the La Francophonie. Yaoundé is the political capital and Douala is the economic capital. Cameroon is divided into 10 regions. The two regions of Southwest and Northwest are English-speaking, and the 8 other regions are French-speaking. The president is Excellency Paul Biya. And you know, 2 months ago, our country organized the African Cup of Nations. We lost it, but we accept it with fair play and conviviality. We were very proud of our bronze medal. Then that is football is familiarity. Football is joined together. It cannot be another something else. Now, coming to National Anti-Corruption Commission, it is an independent public body created by a presidential decree on 2006. Its main mission is to contribute to fight corruption by, namely, monitoring and evaluating the effective implementation of the governmental anti-corruption plan, gathering, centralizing, and analyzing the denunciations and information forwarded to it in respect of corrupt practices, deeds and facts and similar offenses, conducting all studies or investigation and proposing any measures aimed at forestalling or curbing corruption, carrying out, where necessary, on-the-spot control of the execution of projects, as well as the evaluation of conditions of public contract awards, disseminating and popularizing anti-corruption instruments, identifying the causes of corruption, and proposing to the relevant authorities measures likely to lead to its eradication from all public or semi-public services. As you've seen, National Anti-Corruption of Cameroon does two main things: prevention and collecting evidences to facts relating to corruption. It is in this main vision that our country paper is aimed on an innovative project to fight corruption. And that innovation project, we name it "Your Telephone is a Weapon to Combat Corruption. Use it." And the objective of this project was to make that each citizen who owns a telephone an actor in the fight against corruption by explaining how he or she can use the phone to better denounce acts of corruption using modern communication tools of the communication. Our toll-free number is 1517. We have a WhatsApp 658262682 and the website of CONAC, and also an email address. We launched this project on April 2022 in Gaoundere, situated at the north of the country, the headquarters of the Adamawa region of Cameroon. The ultimate goal was to fight against impunity, push fear into the camp of the corrupt person, and increase the number of denunciation. Now, why focus on the telephone? Because we realize that 9 out of 10 adults Cameroonians have a mobile telephone. 1 out of 2 Cameroonians adults use a smartphone. The smartphone offers a range of services, including the camera, the recorder, and the audio player. With the telephone, victims or witnesses of an act of corruption can call our toll-free number 1517, take photos, record sounds, and make videos as evidence of the incriminated act, which they can send through WhatsApp or our email address. The campaign we carry on the field entails carrying out of roadshow caravan through all the main highways of the country with stops at toll gates, villages, and towns. Affixing posters popularizing new CONAC denunciation channels in public spaces of every town and village. Distribution of CONAC gadgets, such as bag, t-shirts, and sensitization materials. We have a journal called Newsletter to the population. Broadcasting information on the media to educate Cameroonians on the proper use of their telephones to document acts of corruption. Broadcasting successful investigation where the corrupt are arrested and under prosecution after they were discreetly filmed by users of public services and denounced at CONAC. So the main challenges of our project are the mobilization of several staff. We do mobilize several staff members, let's say 20% divided into 4 teams and taking care of their outstation expenses for 1 week for the launching and first field work. Printing a lot of gadgets, t-shirts, caps for members of the caravan, printing posters too, flyers for distribution to the population. We acquired 2 rechargeable sound devices to facilitate mobilization of the population on the field. We do mobilize staff to quickly respond to the denunciation sent through the new communication channels and the need for more investigators to follow up denunciation. And what are we expecting from this project? By December 2022, when the campaign rounds up, CONAC will have, let's say, put up 10,000 posters at A3 format and 30,000 flyers of format A5 in public places, in towns and villages all over Cameroon. Directly sensitize over 5 million Cameroonians through the roadshow and over 10 million Cameroonians indirectly through the media and posters. Receive over 3,000 denunciations with documented evidence through the Commission's modern communication platforms. Already, just a few weeks into the campaign, the number of denunciations received through the WhatsApp number has moved from nothing or a few a day to at least 10 per day, and same for the denunciation received through our email address. What lessons to learn from this project? The first is that the use of modern communication facilities offered by smart mobile phones had made denunciation easy. It has also enabled some individuals to provide the first evidences to alleged acts of corruption. This has greatly eased the job of investigators who do not have to start up investigation from scratch. Investigation does go on faster. Corrupt persons, most especially corrupt civil servants, are aware that they are now being watched by many. That's why I was talking of prevention. Each public service user has been made to be an active corruption fighter, as he or she can discreetly collect evidences of acts of corruption. The broadcast of successful investigation from denunciation and evidences forwarded to the Commission by users has instilled fear in the corrupt act, and consequently, we hope it will lead to a drop in corruption. Furthermore, the corruption instinct is managed by greed and fear within an individual. When the feeling of fear rises, as is the case now in our country, the desire to be corrupt drops. And to end, some recommendations. The smart mobile phone is a groundbreaking technology in the fight against corruption. The use of one of its applications, the WhatsApp, has gained grounds everywhere. It is widely used today to transmit documents, sound clips, and videos amongst persons or groups of individuals. Anti-graft institutions can thus encourage the general public to use WhatsApp to reach them by acquiring WhatsApp numbers and making sure they respond promptly, maybe if possible interactive, of all inquiries sent through that channel. Having an operational email address that is consulted at least once every day, encouraging victims or witnesses of acts of corruption to document evidences, it may be by some text, audio, video, and forward such information to the anti-corruption units alongside their denunciations, ensuring that the anti-corruption entity is well-staffed to assure prompt follow-up of denunciation. As conclusion of this national paper, we can say that anti-corruption agencies that have not yet started using modern information and communication technologies in their daily work, most especially in receiving denunciation from the public, should strongly think of doing so. It is easier, cheaper, and faster for the public to reach an anti-corruption agency through WhatsApp and email than through a traditional postal mail. Thank you for your kind attention, dear colleague.
A big hand clap for Professor Anukaha from Cameroon. He has used up 17 minutes of his 20 minutes. He has saved us 3 minutes when you put the 5 from Botswana. We have saved 8 minutes. Thank you very much. Wow. Your telephone is a weapon to fight corruption. Wow. Launched just last month. It's not surprising because Cameroon is said to be one of the most urban populated countries in Africa, with 90% of telephone telephone coverage. It would be interesting to follow the progress in Cameroon. So instead of people wasting time with the WhatsApp and sending pictures and listening and reading, less productive activity, you fight corruption. Thank you, Cameroon. Hands up for Cameroon once again. Now we have some 15 minutes for engaging from the floor. If you have any questions or comments, this is your time. And if possible, if you can direct them to any particular person, that will even help. Who is taking around the microphone? Yes, if you put up your hand, there's a microphone here. I can't read which country. Oh, I can't read. Eh? Okay, you'll tell us who you are. I can't read from here. The microphone, please.
Thank you, moderator. I'm Tulani Mkungo from South Africa. Just my first question is directed to Botswana. I believe you were referring to corruption risk assessment, or you were not specific. I want to check if this corruption risk assessment is focused on sector-based or is it at ministerial levels. How are you conducting it, but not going into too much detail, just at the high level in terms of how you are conducting it, and what are the hindrances that you have faced, and how have you overcome them? Then the second one to Cameroon. As the smartphone has the capability of photoshopping doing images, you Photoshop, you put someone's face, you do something, and it's easy to fabricate people through the videos and photos to say this is evidence. Do you have a case assessment committee that look after each those evidence and evaluate, and then make recommendations to say this is really a valid evidence to be followed, or you just investigate everything that comes through your images and WhatsApp and videos? Thank you.
You got the question. We have someone behind. You will tell us which country and what your names are. Yes.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. My name is Edward Hosea from Tanzania. I work with the Bar Association of Tanzania, the former anti-corruption czar in Tanzania as well. My question goes to Professor from Cameroon.
And if you speak louder, please.
Okay. My question goes to Professor from Cameroon when he was presenting the advantages of using a smartphone. Now, my question is the question of admissibility of evidence. Have you considered the information that you receive from different citizens on the way that you want to prevent corruption in Cameroon? In my country, the law says the issue of competence, who should tender the evidence, and whether the evidence is authentic. The previous speaker spoke about the manipulation of the phone. For example, images, one can manipulate Photoshop, et cetera, et cetera. Have you considered that aspect? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Before the microphone comes back, there are no more questions. People have listened and learned. So now, we'll get back the microphone to our presenters, and I will ask first Mr. Taimin from Botswana. Incidentally, sorry, I gave you the wrong statistics, not quite, but the original Botswana was at 61%, but it came down to 55. So the original one was 61. Is that right?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Thank you, my neighbor. Your question was whether our assessment is, our risk assessment is sector-based. Yes, it is sector-based. You recall that we actually have what we call anti-corruption committees within ministries. So those anti-corruption committees within ministries do the assessment, but of course with the help of the DCEC. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to institutionalize this assessment within the ministries so that we do away this whole idea that anti-corruption work is for the DCEC, but that it is for the ministries as well. Because, like I said, our approach is performance-based anti-corruption measures. So they are actually sector-based, because each ministry, whenever they have any project that they want to undertake, either they will apply what we call a transaction monitoring to monitor what is going on in that project. Or there will be certain projects that would pick ourselves and run with them. So in short, I think that is the answer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. May I now invite Professor Koha to answer the questions that were directed at you.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. I think 2 questions have been put to me. The first one from the colleague of South Africa, asking me whether the new process of collecting proof, how we evaluated it. I would say this operation has been launched only a few weeks ago. We have not yet had the time to evaluate it. And this brings me to the second question. Yes, we know corruption is not done on daylight. Acts of corruption are done in the night. They are done in the offices. They are done in places which may be qualified as private places and places. And the question, the very question is to know, are the judges who are going to solve those cases, are not they going to say the manner of recovering those evidences were illegal? But I think in Cameroon, we do not have a precise law which solves this problem. I think we have launched a new operation and we are waiting for what will be said. But I think fight against corruption necessitates that there must be new rules. We're talking of the proof of the corruption, which is very difficult. But under the United Nations Convention, we see that it's true that the general rule is that who allege must prove. But the convention permits country to reverse the evidence. Then I think the colleague of Nigeria was talking about that. For now, we are not domesticate in our cases that disposition of the UNCAC, but we think that the process is on course. Maybe we'll have those facilities, because if you say that you will only have those proof according to the normal use, you will never have evidence to condemn many of those corrupt people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of this particular session, and I want to thank Mr. Tamin Katomolo from Botswana and Professor Anukaha from Cameroon for your presentations. Speaking for myself, I'm wiser than I came for listening to you both. And I hope that the audience are also a little wiser than we came. This requires now Dr. Koranteng to please come and take back your microphone as we leave the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chair and Chairman of the Association of Anti-Corruption Agency, for ably chairing this presentation. We're going to move straight away to another set of country presentation. So we're going to call upon Namibia. Namibia is the chair, so Namibia should come up stage. And then we will call Ghana, CHRAJ, we'll call Ghana EOCO, and we call Nigeria EFCC. This will all come up stage. I think we need extra chair. You have to add extra chair to it, yeah.
Come again?
You mean ICPC, not EOCC? That's...
Oh, it's IC. Thank you. Yes, I was saying EFCC, but it's ICPC, sorry. And of course, EOCO. Those of you who will be doing PowerPoint presentation, have you uploaded your PowerPoint presentations already? Oh. And whilst we are waiting, after this presentation, we're going to have, there's a change in the program. We're going to have Professor Edward Hosea presentation will come after this one. And probably Dr. Usfa one will go tomorrow. So that we can, after Dr. Hosea, we can brief for today and go and prepare for the dinner. So that will be how we're going to go. Again, the chairperson must insist on the timing. 20 minutes each for the presentation. And as you all know, tomorrow, all the presentations will be done at Serena Hotel. We're not going to come here tomorrow. So tomorrow till we're finished, everything will be done in Serena Hotel. So that is the arrangement. So again, Mr. Chair, 20 minutes each, no more, no less. If they finish less than 20 minutes, the better. But they can't go beyond 20 minutes because of the time. Thank you. You can take it away now.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Roger. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to facilitate the presentation by the 3 institutions from one country. They are all from Ghana.
Oh, no. This is from Nigeria.
Oh, no, one is from Nigeria. Yeah, you are neighbors. Anyway, you are neighbors. Thank you. All right. The first institution is the Commission of Human Rights and Administrative Justice. And the presenter's name is Mr. Stephen Azantlo, who is the director in the Directorate or Department of Anti-Corruption. The second presenter will be from the Economic and Organized Crime Office, and the presenter is Mr. Mame Yatwa Ado. is a commissioner of police, MA, yeah, it's a madam. And then the last one is from Nigeria, from ICP, is Mr. Abia Topu, who is a director in the institution in this ICP. ICPC stands for, let me just look what it stands for. It stands for Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission. Am I right, sir? No, thank you very much. All right. Without further ado, I give a platform to Mr. Stephen Azantlo. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dr. Ruja, all other protocols observed. Since there is an injunction against speaking for more than 20 minutes, I will try to sort of summarize the presentation that we as a Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice in Ghana have to make here. Can we be more? Thank you very much. As you can see, we're trying to focus on the fight against corruption in Ghana, the successes and challenges that we have experienced. I am very much aware that this group is aware that since 2015, Ghana has adopted a comprehensive strategy for fighting against corruption. That strategy we call the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan, NACAP for short. I'm told that in previous presentations, so much has been said about our National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. But permit me to just remind us of the objectives of our National Anti-Corruption Action Plans. Sorry. Now, so in 2015, we came up with NACAP with these objectives. And NACAP is built on 3 strategic objectives. The first objective is to build public capacity to condemn and fight corruption, and to make corruption a high-risk, low-gain activity. The second objective was to institutionalize efficiency, accountability, and transparency in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. The third is to engage individuals, media, civil society organizations in reporting and combating corruption. And the fourth is to conduct effective investigations and prosecution of corrupt conduct. Now, under NACAP, all institutions of state, civil society, private sector organizations, indeed, all sectors of the society are involved in prosecuting the agenda of NACAP, in the sense that both public and private organizations have activities to undertake in respect of NACAP. The idea is to involve everybody in the fight against corruption, having regards to the fact that no one particular person, no one particular institution, no individual alone can fight corruption. Now, because of this, over the years, we have made some progress. And some of the contributions that have been made by NACAP are that we've been able to raise awareness of the ills of corruption, and more institutions have either established or are establishing safe reporting mechanisms at the workplace. The key revenue collection agencies are being digitized or have been digitized. There have been digitization of the banking industry in Ghana. The post operations have been digitized. And we have established a key accountability institution forum, which I will throwing more light on in the course of this discussion. Now, within the framework of NACAP, a lot of legislation have been passed in Ghana with a view to fighting corruption. There are so many of them, but I just want to speak about one of them, which has to do with the Criminal Offences Amendment Act. Now, prior to 2020, corruption was a misdemeanor in Ghana. Oh, the offense of corruption was a misdemeanor. And because of that, the punishment for it was just minimum of 2 years and a maximum of 5 years. But in 2020, there was an amendment to our Criminal Offences Act, of course, championed by institutions such as CHRAJ and the Attorney General's Department, to make corruption a second-degree felony. Because of that, the offense of corruption is now a felony, and the punishment for it, you can receive a maximum of 25 years imprisonment if you engage in corruption. There are other legislations. I wouldn't want to waste our time to go through all of them. But suffice it to mention that also we have the Anti-Money Laundering Act that also came about as a result of NACAP, our Narcotics Commission Act, the Witness Protection Act, and the Public Procurement Act, etc., etc. But as a commission, we have a very critical role to play. I'm talking about the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. We have a critical role to play in the implementation of NACAP in the sense that we are the coordinating agency for the implementation of NACAP, and because of that, our coordinating role on NACAP includes facilitating development of analyzed work implementation plans, monitoring and evaluation activities, preparation of annual progress reports, supporting implementing partners, and organizing forums for the examination of progress reports, and organizing meetings of NACAP implementation structures. These are the roles that the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice has been playing in Ghana in terms of the implementation of NACAP. Because of that, there's so much expectation on the Commission. And for that reason, we have taken it upon ourselves to evolve certain initiatives with a view to pushing the fight against corruption to several levels. One of them is a key accountability institution forum. Now, in May 2020, the Commission organized a meeting for key accountability institutions in Ghana in collaboration with the African Parliamentarians Network Against Corruption and with support from Anti-Corruption, Rule of Law, and Accountability Project, ARAP, of the EU, to consider a draft memorandum of understanding between and among key accountability institutions in Ghana. The key accountability institutions in Ghana are 11 in number, and they consist of our own Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, the Economic and Organized Crime Office. The head of the institution is here. I know she will throw more light on that. The Attorney General and Minister for Justice, the Ghana Audit Service, Ghana Police Service, Bureau of National Investigations, Internal Audit Agency, Financial Intelligence Center, the Parliament of Ghana, Narcotics Control Commission, and Office of the Special Prosecutor. Together, these institutions constitute key accountability institutions in Ghana. And today, we have what we call a key accountability institutions forum. Now, what is the rationale, or what are the objectives of this forum? I've already indicated that fighting corruption demands a collaborative and cooperative attitude. Indeed, if you have institutions that are fighting corruption and they don't come together and see where they are going, they don't share information, exchange ideas, then we'll have a situation where we can have chaos and some confusion. Because of that, if you look at the objectives of the Key Accountability Institution Forum, they are to ensure the effective exchange of information, foster better understanding and cooperation among the key accountability institutions, to promote synergy and better coordination of activities, enhance capacity of key accountability institutions to address challenges of emerging methods of corruption and crime, and minimize the potential for mandate overlaps. Now, following the establishment of the forum, we came out with what we call protocols. And the protocols were formulated just to guide the implementation of the MOU. I've already looked at the objectives of the MOU. Now, this year, in fact, every year we're supposed to have an action plan to guide our activities. Prior to leaving Ghana, the action plan was almost complete. But even before an action plan was put in place, in 2021, work started in progress. In Ghana, every year, we have what we call Natal Corruption Week. And for the purpose of what happened last year, the key accountability institutions came together and educated the public on their various mandates and how the public can access their activities. The idea is to expose to the public or the citizens in Ghana what key accountability institutions are doing and to let them appreciate and know and have a better understanding as to how they can approach key accountability institutions whenever there's any complaint or case of corruption. Now, so you see, we have some pictures to share with you. I don't think I want to belabor that point. But the next most important activity that our commission has undertaken, or is in the process of undertaking, is the Ghana Corruption Survey. I believe many of you are aware of what Transparency International has been doing through the Corruption Perception Index. Now, we in Ghana have decided to conduct what we call the Ghana Corruption Survey. This is an actual corruption survey. And it is different from the perception index in the sense that this time around, we try to take information to do a survey on actual corruption in Ghana. Indeed, following from the experience that Nigeria has had one. Now, we are doing this in partnership with the UNODC. And I believe, I understand, okay, I can see some, okay, I believe that's Jennifer from UNODC. I believe tomorrow she has a presentation to make. She may say something about it. But UNODC has been very helpful in our fight against corruption in Ghana, especially in terms of this survey. They are giving us technical support, they are giving us financial support, and as we speak today, the field survey has been completed. Just before we came, the analysis of the data that was taken from the field has been completed. Now we are making plans towards launching the report so that at the end of it all, we will know what is the actual level of corruption in Ghana. You know, sometimes it is easy to say that, well, a particular country is corrupt, or a particular organization is corrupt, or a particular institution is corrupt, but what is the real data? That is what this corruption survey is intended to do. Now, apart from that, we are also engaged in what we call corruption risk assessment of some public sector institutions. And once again, we are doing this in partnership with the UNODC, which is also giving us some technical support. Now, The idea in organizing or conducting corruption risk assessments is that we want to be able to identify, or we already did that, identify and prioritize corruption risk factors in public institutions. At the end of it all, we see what mitigation plans we can put in place so that we can tackle corruption even before it rears its head. Unfortunately, last year, we started with 2 institutions, the Ghana Health Service, and then the Ministry of Food and Agricultural Development. These are 2 institutions that we started with this project. Our intention is to expand the project to cover 10 more public sector institutions within the next 2 years. At the end of it all, we shall cover all public sector institutions, so that we will have a situation where, before even corruption comes, there are preventive mechanisms. Everybody in the public sector institution will know what role he can play to fight corruption. This is the idea behind the corruption risk assessment plans that we're doing for public sector institutions in Ghana. So there are some pictures of some workshops that we held with UNODC when we are trying to assist us to organize those workshops. Now, another strategy that we are putting in place is the standard operating procedures for whistleblower protection. In Ghana, we have a whistleblower protection law, which is the Whistleblower Act 720. But we notice that there are some weaknesses in the Act. Fortunately, once again, UNODC came to our assistance. We are trying to put in place standard operating procedures, what we call SOPs for short, for public sector institutions. Now, if you look at the idea is that when these operating procedures are put in place, they will fill in the gaps that have been identified in our Whistleblower Protection Act. Let me just share with you some of the gaps that we have. For instance, we have a situation in Ghana where if a whistleblower should make a complaint to any institution, that institution is mandatorily required to make a copy of the complaint to the Attorney General's Department within a certain period of 7 days. That institution is mandatorily required, after we have conducted an investigation, to make a report available to the Attorney General's Department. Now we have a situation in Ghana too where the Minister for Justice and the Attorney General's Department is one person. So the 2 institutions are fixed on one. So the question is, what confidence is there that where there's a Minister of State that has to be investigated, or someone should blow a whistle on a corrupt activity by a Minister of State or a government official? Would there be confidence? Would the people have confidence in that system? So we're trying to come up with standard operating procedures so that at least potential whistleblowers will know the safeguard mechanisms that are put in place so that when they are blowing the whistle, they can have confidence that once they blow the whistle, at least some amount of work will be done and that they can be protected properly. So we organized a workshop towards that. There are other initiatives in the pipeline. As I indicated earlier on, every year in Ghana, we have what we call the Anti-Corruption Week. Last year, we had the President of Ghana launching the National Culture Review Program and the Schools Integrity Project as part of the week. The idea is to build a culture of integrity in Ghana at all levels of society. We're hoping that when we implement these projects, at least the level of corruption can reduce. I'm mindful of the time that I have. I didn't want to believe I've gone through many of the key points. I want to thank you for your attention. Perhaps maybe when questions come, I can elaborate on what we have done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen. Another round of applause, please, for Mr. Stephen. And thank you for the role that your commission is playing, especially in enhancing the capacity of accountability institutions. That is very, very critical. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next on the list is Commissioner Mame.
So the main object, prevent and detect organized crime, and generally to facilitate the confiscation of proceeds of crime. That is the main object of that. So the functions, like I've already indicated, on the authority of the Attorney General, prosecute serious offenses that involve financial or economic loss to the Republic or any state entity or institution in which the state has financial interest. So we realize that even if it is not a state institution but private institution, the fact that that private institution will have to pay tax to the government, the state will still have interest in that institution, and for that matter, EOCO is interested. We also deal with money laundering, human trafficking, prohibited cyber activity, tax fraud, and other serious offenses. Here, other serious offenses is not defined. So anything that we consider to be serious offense, EOCO is interested in that. We also, to recover the proceeds of crime, then we monitor activities connected with the object of the office. Then we also disseminate information in the course of our investigation to any other law enforcement agency that we might think will be in need of that information. We also work with other state and foreign agencies. For instance, when somebody is convicted in any other jurisdiction, we still work with state international bodies, and then we work to recover proceeds of crime. Either the proceeds of crime is in other jurisdiction or in Ghana. And any other function that we perform in line with the object of our office. So how do we do that? We monitor, detect, and prevention of corruption and its related activities. We also investigate and prosecute corruption cases, and then also public education. So, anti-corruption awareness, we have printed flyers, leaflets, souvenirs. I even have some chocolates with the mission and object of the function that I'll be giving to you. And then we also have a hotline and vibrant website to the public. And we have also tried to take away that we want to demystify the office. Formally, when you hear EOCO, it's like we are only there to just invite people and then put them in a very bad situation. And then, like my brother from CHRAJ said, every December we set up 1 week as anti-corruption week, where we create awareness of the office and other things. So through our public affairs office, we have done a lot of public education, and the public hotline has also been very effective for that. We've taken the public awareness to schools and other institutions. We were very much surprised when we went to basic schools and secondary schools. People have heard, especially the school students and other things, they've heard corruption, but they didn't actually understand the impact of corruption. So by taking the awareness campaign to them, they actually been conscientized, and they now understand the impacts and also what everybody is talking about corruption. And one student said his understanding of corruption is to see police officers taking money from drivers. That is his understanding of corruption. But they didn't actually know the impact and what it is that when we talk about corruption and other things. So some of the examples of assets that we have been able to confiscate in the course of our investigation, some of them are here, the pictures are there. Some of them, the convictions actually took place outside Ghana, but we were able to trace and confiscate the assets for the country. So these are some of the pictures that I've shown to you. We've realized that fighting corruption is not something that one institution can do. like my brother said, the accountable institutions are those that we work together with. Some of them may not have the laws backing them like EOCO has. For instance, the Ghana Police Service law is not something that will allow them to confiscate or freeze assets immediately unless they go to court. So we work together with them. When they are investigating any case that immediately they have to freeze anything, they come to us and then we do that on their behalf. So we work with FIC, Ghana Revenue Authority, and other state institutions that are also mandated to fight corruption as part of their mandate. So what have we been able to do? The effective asset declaration regime has been put in place for public officers to declare their assets on assumption of office and at the end of the tenure in compliance with the Public Office Holder Declaration of Assets and Disqualification Act 1998 at 550. The lifestyle audit of public officers in accordance with the provision of Article 286 Clause 4 of the 1992 Constitution and the Section 1, Clause 3 of Ghana's Anti-Money Laundering Act 2020, Act 1044. So we also set charge of corrupt public officials, naming and shaming of corrupt public officials, and then putting in place a watertight public procurement regime. They are all things that we do. Then there's increased awareness of the activities of EOCO. People didn't even know the offices throughout the country. So now we are creating awareness, we are moving to the regions, going to schools, churches, marketplaces to talk about economic and organized crime office, the object, what we do, and then how they can also report cases or if they have information about any organized crime or any corrupt activity, that they can also inform the office for us to take appropriate action to do that. So some key results that we have undertaken. Some officials of the Ghana Youth Employment and Employment Agency were successfully prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced for causing financial loss of 2.6 million to the six. Then a number of officials from the Social Security and National Insurance Trust are currently being prosecuted for procurement fraud involving the loss of about 72 million. Then a former CEO of Ghana Cocoa Board is currently standing trial for causing financial loss to the state to the tune of 217 million Ghana cedis. And then currently another investigation by Ghana National Ambulance Services where acts of financial impropriety were on earth. Currently the matter is being prosecuted before the High Court. We have also confiscated a multi-million-dollar mansion in Accra owned by a drug baron as part of his asset tracing and recovery effort. Then Maslock CEO, Microfinance and Small Loan Center is currently being prosecuted for embezzling the sum of 500,000 Ghana cedis. We have also, together with Ghana Revenue Authority, been able to rake in revenue close to 80 million through tax recoveries obtained from local and foreign entities as well as individuals. The former CEO of Venture Capital Trust Fund and other public officials are also facing prosecution for having embezzled over 20 million. And several assets in relation to this case remain frozen pending final determination of the case. What are some of the challenges that we face? Inadequate education on issues of corruption. The National Commission for Civic Education is not well resourced to take it to all places in Ghana for people to understand and also to be conscientized on the impact of corruption. We also don't have reliable audit trail to detect corruption since Ghana predominantly operates on a cash-based economy. So tracing and then things will happen and it becomes very difficult to detect because most of the things are done on cash basis. Currently, there's no asset regime recovery in place, but Ghana, with the support of GIZ, is developing a policy of asset tracing and its management. And by the end of May, that policy will be operational. And then all the law enforcement agencies that have the mandate to trace and seize assets will have a policy that will serve as a guideline for us to manage and seize assets. Currently, we also have public awareness on the negative effect on corruption is very, very low. So one of the things that Ghana has also started together with Integrity Initiative is Eye on Corruption. It is an application on Google App or Apple Store, like where you have to use your phone and also to call. That one gives you the opportunity to report any information that you have on possible corrupt practices, and it is anonymous. When that information is given to us, we are able to trace and investigate. And this is not something that the information that you give to us is just taken like that and used as evidence, but rather it serves as a link or information for us to also follow up and identify whether there's some truth in whatever allegation that you are making, and then we go through to make effort to gather evidence to support whatever allegation that the person has made. In conclusion, fighting corruption is everybody's business. It doesn't matter where you sit. It doesn't matter whether you work with anti-corruption agency or what. It is everybody's responsibility. And that is why everybody's hand must be on deck. That is why we've taken the awareness to schools, to churches, to marketplaces, and other places so that people will understand and also will know the impact of corruption in our organization. And at the end of the day, if we're able to do that, it will not just be just talking, but rather talking and also acting so that together we can fight corruption in Africa in general, and then in Ghana in particular. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bame. Indeed, fighting corruption is everyone's responsibility. It requires multiple institutions, especially as we have said, and we witness it here. There is a commission here, there is your office, all are dealing with the fight against corruption. Awareness and prevention that you have mentioned as well. That's very important. The statistic you have given is also a testimony that your office is working on organized crimes. Thank you very much. Next, I'll give a floor to Mr. Abia from ICPC. Please, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Chairperson of this association. And I would like to speak or discuss briefly our preventive measures. All along since morning, we've been hearing enforcement, and so forth. The ICPC has a very robust framework on prevention. I will discuss a few of these tools to save time and see how we can borrow a few of them. Section 6, B, A to F gives the Commission his mandate and his powers. And for prevention, you find that in section 6B to F of that law. So why do we prevent? We believe that prevention is cost-effective, it is sustainable, it is proactive, it saves time, saves cost, and resources. So the ICPC looks at three main areas of its activities. One is the individual, behavioral change of the person. We also look at the public systems. Are these systems conducive of corruption? Then we look at the institutions. The institutions, are they compliant to rules, to laws, to policies, to standards of government? So we ensure that these three areas are considered in system studies and reviews. I thought, okay, just rush that. I mentioned that the individual, the public systems and institutions. Then we look at, we know that people are so much inclined to enforcement. We are so much obsessed with enforcement. But prevention in the long run, in the long term, is helpful. Because I said it's proactive because, like my chairman said earlier, corruption is mutative. If today you are looking at this side, tomorrow you may come in this other way. So, but if you prevent, it checks those changing tactics. So what are the tools that we use? We have system studies and review, considers the past and present vulnerabilities, weaknesses of the agency. We look at corruption risk assessment, the potentials for weakness or weaknesses. Then we look at the anti-corruption and transparency units. These are internal mechanisms in government agencies to help fight corruption. We are happy that a number of agencies in Africa have borrowed this. We heard the other day that even Argentina and Brazil were asking us how they could learn from this approach. We have the Ethics and Integrity Compliance Scorecard, the EICS. That one is what we deploy in MDAs, government agencies, to check their compliance standards to, like I said, government ethics, laws, policies, and so forth. Then we look at the National Ethics and Integrity Policy. This is also a tool which the Commission initiated to drive behavioral change. So for system study, you want to ask what did we achieve from that? In 2019 to 2021, the sum of 147 and 261 were at different times recovered through these interventions. We have ghost workers, budget padding. You may not be aware of this, but in my country, certain government agencies will inflate budgets just for their personal gain. So through this tool, we've been identifying these problems and stopping the theft of public funds. So the impact of system study, you want to ask me, it promotes structural changes in the operation of the government, particularly reducing cost of governance. Our advisories to government helps in government understanding better use of budget, better value for money, improved budget and project completion, service delivery, and public awareness generally. The Commission studies also have positively impacted the selection, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation projects by the executive and the legislative arms of government. And importantly, we have, through the study, shut down a number of illegal degree awarding institutions. We hear that this is rampant in Africa. We have one-room universities, one-room colleges, awarding PhDs and so forth. Through this tool, we've closed down over 120 of such illegal centers. The Ethics and Integrity Compliance Scorecard. Like I said, this is a preventive tool which we use to assess government agencies and see how compliant they are to policies, directives, and the law. And it is one of the tools we drew from the organizational model or theory of corruption, and trying to see that agencies are compliant to standards and ethics. So the scorecard measures and strengthens ethics and integrity. We have 3 key performance indicators: management system, administrative system, and the financial system. The financial system, for instance, we look at how compliant the agency is in financial areas. Procurement, for instance, are you obeying the procurement laws? In administrative, are you having a good reward and punishment system? Do you have whistleblowing mechanisms? Do you have mechanisms to report corruption? Like we said, the internal anti-corruption agencies or units, in your agency. So we use this to measure and see that government is not wasting money on such agencies, and they are compliant with the government rules. So this tool creates a platform for comparing and analyzing weaknesses that make MDAs prone to corruption. So the agencies are scored and ranked. So there is some competition now among the agencies to see that they are ranked high and that they are seen as ethical and above board. So it also gives us opportunity to monitor and evaluate MDAs and determine the level of compliance with ethics and integrity requirements. The MDAs on their own can self-evaluate themselves. They can on their own evaluate, assess what they are doing if they are compliant. And lastly, it gives us a tracking tool to monitor risk and weaknesses and direct the management of such agencies to either change or review such areas. We've done this deployment for about 4 years now, and I'll give you some of the things that we found in the in the deployment. One of such is that we find that agencies, some of them have infractions of the Public Procurement Act. This is very common. They abuse the procurement process. We see that they default in tax remittances and statutory deductions. We find that some of them even fail to submit their audited reports to the Auditor General. Some lack whistleblowing mechanism. They lack Ac2s. They lack mechanisms that will help in fighting corruption. And they don't conduct system studies. They don't conduct risk assessment, of course, making them open to weaknesses and vulnerabilities. So another tool is the tracking of sexual harassment. This is common in some countries, and Nigeria is not an exception. There are predators in public offices. There are predators in schools and institutions. And it's so sad that those we entrust with our children are the ones abusing them, either for marks or other gratification. So we use this initiative to follow up on such criminals, and a number of them have been arrested and facing trial. In 2017 or thereabout, a professor was indicted, prosecuted, and jailed for 5 years. So we trying to stop this menace. We have capacity building workshops for our officers. We engage the public on public enlightenment and the civil society groups. We identify and examine laws, policies, systems on sexual harassment with a view to identifying gaps and submitting proposals for filling these gaps. Then we draft, in collaboration with some of these schools and institutions, we draft and produce codes of ethics and conduct against abuses and misconduct. Like I said, we prosecute indicted officials as deterrents to other predators and to clean the system. So the other two, at that time. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Still.
Okay, thanks. I don't want to fall foul of your law.
Yeah, you still have 5 more minutes.
Okay. So we have this tool called the Constituency and Executive Project Tracking Initiative. The idea is that before now, our legislators will have the privilege of having certain projects in their name, in their constituencies. And that will be the end. Once money is paid, the projects are not done. And funds running to millions and billions of naira wasted. So we, with the present chairman and his board, very innovative board, they brought this tool, and then we have, over the years, succeeded in recovering and having projects back on track. In fact, between 2019 and year 2000, over 2,000 projects worth over 300 billion were tracked and they are back on track. So we work with the media, we work with the civil society groups to assist us in identifying these things. Because you can't work alone. You need these people who are in the field and the grassroots to assist us in getting these things done. So I think that figure will show you our activities on this project. I'm told I have 5 minutes.
Round up, please.
So we have this other one called the behavioral change development using the National Ethics and Integrity Policy. The policy is simply to revive nationalism, patriotism, honesty in our individuals. And we are using certain individuals in the public, traditional rulers, religious rulers, people high up who can really influence our people for positive change. I think that figure speaks on some of our activities, but the chairman is saying I should hurry. So we also collaborate with other agencies, security force agencies to fight corruption. And one of such is that the road traffic corruption, people taking bribes on the highway. A number of them have been arrested. We working with certain officers of the other agencies to get them off the road. And we also work with these other institutions to check corruption in the education sector. So to conclude, the ICPC believes that these measures should complement enforcement action. We are not saying they are just foolproof, but they will be helpful to drive home the enforcement action, which is the face of anti-corruption. These transformative measures are cost-effective, sustainable, and helpful in the fight against corruption. The current board, led by our chairman, Professor Owasanoye, is not resting on his laurels in fighting this menace and fulfilling his mandate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abia. Certainly, Nigeria is the biggest African economy, and fighting corruption in a biggest economy as Nigeria, you need multiple institutions, you need multiple laws. We heard what Prof. Bolaji told us this morning. And you also need multiple tools, as you have just explained. All these efforts combined together can make the fight against corruption very effective. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give another round of hand claps to all the 3 presenters before I open up the floor. Now the floor will be open for any question or any contribution to what they have said. Please identify the institution you are representing or the country you are representing, and direct your question or a comment to the respective presenters. We'll do that within 10 minutes' time. Yes, where is the... Thank you.
Oh, okay. Really? Oh, okay.
Thank you. My name is Patrick from Malawi. I have 3 questions to all the 3 presenters. I will start with the ICPC. The first question I want to find out the efficacy of these particular committees, the anti-corruption and transparency units. how effective are they in the prevention of corruption in the institutions? Secondary to the same institution, ICPC, on the ethics and integrity scorecard. You talked about coming up with results where you rank these institutions. After ranking, what happens to those institutions that are non-compliant? Secondary, we are talking about here just focusing on the systems. What about those actors that are behind the performance in these particular institutions? What happens to them? Is there any sanctions for non-compliance? That's one, to ICPC. Secondary, to CHRAJ. You talked about the NACAP. I just want to find out the funding mechanism in the implementation of the NACAP, more especially the non-state actors. How do they finance their activities? That's one part. Secondary, NACAP, you talked about the Key Accountability Institutions Forum. Yes, you have an MOU, but usually it's a practice that these particular bodies would want to advance their own mandate and at times even compete for excellence. How is this safeguarded? The third question goes to Ghana, EOCO. You talked that they currently do not have an asset recovery regime, and a policy to that effect is being drafted. Yet in your presentation, you demonstrated pictures of some of the assets that have been seized. I don't know under what framework was this done, if I got you correctly. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other question, please? Yes? There is a hand that side.
Thank you very much. My name is Harrison Mutabazi. I'm a judge of the High Court of Rwanda and currently working with the Inspectorate Department. I have two questions. One question is directed from the first speaker from Ghana. He talked about safe reporting mechanisms at workplaces. So I just wanted to have examples from safe reporting, how it's done and what is done in this for emulation. And the second question goes to the commissioner, Madam Commissioner from Ghana also. She talked about naming and shaming of public officers. I just wanted to know about at what stage did you do this? Is it at the finality of a verdict or it's done at all processes? So these are my two questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other question, please? Yes, please. There's a hand there.
Thank you, moderator. My name is KK from Ghana. I want to congratulate all the three speakers for the brilliant presentation you have made this afternoon. I have two questions. For there are three. Two will go to ICPC. ICPC, I just want a simple explanation as to the difference between your work and that of EFCC. My second question is that you did say that you sometimes arrest drivers who take money from passengers or whatever it is. I'm wondering how you do it, because your office, you don't put on uniform, or you wear uniform for this purpose, or do you use regular policemen for that purpose? I want an answer. And then my last question to CHRAJ. CHRAJ, your presentation, you mentioned UNODC, that is United Nations Office of Drug and something. In Accra, we have a drug office. What's the relationship between your office and the drug office in Ghana? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. for me to be fair to the presenter, let me give them an opportunity to respond to the questions. Please, I start with you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I committed an institutional sin when I didn't recognize the presence of my Commissioner for Human Rights and Administrative Justice, Mr. Joseph Whittle. Is here with us. As a matter of fact, the presentation that I did was for and on his behalf. Mr. Whittle, can we acknowledge your presence?
Thank you.
And so, if in my attempt to address the questions or issues that you have raised, I have not sufficiently handled them, I believe Mr. Whittle will come in to clarify one or two issues. Thank you very much. Now, there was a question that was asked on NACAP. The question was on the private sector institutions, how they fund their activities, those agencies that are outside the state. Did I get your question very well? Because I wasn't writing at that time, I believe, but this is a question. Now, let me indicate that prior to the formulation of NACAP, we engaged in extensive consultations across the whole length and breadth of the country. We engaged in consultations with NGOs, civil society, private sector, state institutions, government officials, politicians. And then we came out with this document called the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. Now, under that plan, all the institutions, both private and state, agreed to certain activities that they are supposed to implement. The beauty about NACAP is that it is a bottom-up approach. A bottom-up in the sense that it is the institutions, the organizations themselves that came together to formulate the strategy. What we did as CHRAJ is to provide the coordinating role. So the private sector institutions all agreed that they are going to undertake certain activities towards championing the fight against corruption. Now, so under NACAP, we have what we call general rules and then what we call specific rules. And now, under the general rules, all the institutions are supposed to budget for NACAP. So if you are for the private sector institution, every year they're supposed to set aside, in fact, a dedicated budget for the implementation of NACAP. Whether the state, it's not the state role to give you funding. Once you have accepted that you're going to implement certain activities, you ought to budget for it. So the issue of budgeting for non-state institutions, I think that has been covered because the state institutions realize that to fight, corruption is something that if we don't fight it, we'll end up all suffering. So they have agreed to fight. For that reason, they all budget towards the implementation of NACAP. So what we do is that once every 2 years, we do what we call a monthly evaluation. We go around to various institutions to ascertain what are the type of things that you agree to do under NACAP, you are doing it. So we visit the private sector, and indeed, let me also indicate that the private sector institutions have a presentation on what we call the MONOCOM. The MONOCOM is a monitoring and evaluation institution under NACAP. So the private sector, they have a representation. So we go around the various institutions to ascertain what they have been able to do. Have you budgeted for NACAP? Have you implemented activities under NACAP? If you have implemented, we want to see the results. Then at the end of it all, we'll write what we call an APR, that is an annual progress report on NACAP. So this is what we do. There was a question too on the, I didn't hear that question very well. Someone spoke about reporting mechanisms. Separate reporting mechanisms. Actually, I'm not sure my presentation covered separate reporting mechanisms. I actually spoke about standard operating procedures. I don't know whether that was what you heard. Yes, I spoke about standard operating procedures. And the standard operating procedures, as I indicated, these are procedures that we are trying to develop as a way of mitigating the gaps that exist in our whistleblower protection mechanism or framework in Ghana. Now, what we are trying to do is that, you see, we have so many laws in Ghana, very beautiful laws, and yet very few people are prepared to come forward to report on instances or cases of corruption. The Whistleblower Act actually was an act that was passed to encourage people to report on acts of corruption. And yet, the feedback is not as much as that we expect. So we are trying to come out with these standard operating procedures in such a way that it will encourage people and indeed inject confidence into the citizenry. Now look, if you have a case of corruption, or if you have information, or if you have a disclosure on act of corruption, or against any miscarriage of justice, or against any illegality in the society, please, we're trying to develop a framework that will make it possible for you to, so that when you make a complaint, at least you have some safeguards that will protect you, so that those challenges we currently face are removed. So that is what we're trying to do with the standard operating procedures. And there was a question that was also asked on the relationship between the UN, our office, and then the drug office in Ghana. Now, UNODC stands for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. They have, I would say it's an office as such, but there's a representative of the organization in Ghana. What we do is we collaborate. Sometimes when we have, the UNODC has an activity, we try to sort of, it serves as a link between us. That is much that I know. Perhaps Commissioner may have more information than I do. I don't know whether I've answered all the questions that were there.
Yes, Commissioner, may I give you, you may wish to link up with what she has already said.
Yeah, I think the first question was whether I indicated that we don't have a national framework on asset recovery, yet we've been able to seize assets. My response is that we have a lot of organizations where they have different acts or different laws, and they all go with their laws. So we don't have a national policy that will be standardized for every organization. So when it comes to even reporting how many assets that we have reported, then we have to go to each individual organization to collect the data. But the one that we are developing will be something that will be for all the organizations with EOCO as the lead agency, collating all the assets, and then there will be a standard operating procedure that will guide all of us. For instance, when EOCO seizes any asset, we have to wait and then go to courts for the court to give pronouncement and other things. When you go to Ghana Police Service, they also have a way of managing that. Probably the Office of the Special Prosecutor also has a different thing. When you go to GRA, they also have a different act. But we want to come out with a comprehensive national framework that will be a standard procedure that will guide all of us, and also for data collection and also reporting purposes. The second question was naming and shaming. Anytime that we start investigation and the case is taken to court, we have court reporters at the various courts where the moment the case is started, the information comes out, the media will discuss it, everybody will know whatever that somebody has done until the case will come to an end. And that alone is something that is putting people on their toes. Because at the end of the day, once the information comes out, you cannot even control how the media will manage it. You realize that once the information comes out that something has happened, somebody is under investigation for any other offense or any corrupt practices, that information is out, it is on the media, on social network, people are talking about it, and that alone is something that people wouldn't even want to go through. And that is what is also helping out. So that is the naming and then shaming. We don't keep anything under the carpet. We don't stop the media from reporting, especially when the case is before the court.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Yes, Mr. Abia, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for your questions. I will try to respond. The first one said, how effective is Ac2? Well, from our study, our surveys, Ac2 has been very, very effective. And of course, we have challenges because these people are working within organizations where they are monitoring. But we've also devised ways of, moving outside that quagmire. One of such is for them to give us information in confidence. You don't need to be so bold to catch thunder with your chest. So you need to give us information in confidence outside the knowledge of anyone. Two, again, we have what we call the Ac2 Effectiveness Index. This tool we use to measure the effectiveness, just like the name suggests, of Ac2s. So we go to the office, we check, do they have their own dedicated office, tools, computers, phones, and so forth. So we measure them too. And now, we now include this tool, the scores of this tool, in the EICS. So you are measured not only on the AIX, but also on the EICS, the Ethics and Integrity Compliance Scorecard. So it makes them to be more serious and compliant. In fact, Ac2s have been conducting system reviews of their agencies and telling us what are the problems and weaknesses and so forth. So you asked me for the ranking. We have about 4 levels of ranking of the MDAs. One is full compliance. Of course, no agency has been able to attain that. Then we have substantial compliance. Of course, a few have broken into that circle. Then we have the partial compliance and the non-compliant. Then of recent, we've had what we call the non-responsive. In other words, they don't even want to respond at all. So you ask me, what do we do with them? Well, with the chairman's directive and the board, most times we conduct a system review on those agencies, particularly their finances. Because if you're not responding, it means you are hiding certain things from us. So we conduct a system study, and if we find anything untoward, we proceed on full investigation. And a number of them are falling foul of that. Then the management of those agencies, we report them to the head of civil service, to the secretary of government, and particularly the report of this study is submitted to the president of Nigeria every year by the chairman, ICPC. So the reprobates on that list are identified, and in some cases, some have been removed from office. Somebody asked me the difference between ICPC and EFCC. We've answered this a number of times, but I will say first that the ICPC came to being pursuant to what we call the Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Act. That act discusses mostly public office corruption. Section 8 to 26 discusses bribery in public office, receipt of gratification, fraud, procurement fraud, and so forth. Then the EFCC Act. EFCC is called the Economic and Financial Crimes Establishment Commission Act. So, from that name, you see that EFCC is coming and works more on economic and financial crimes. Then I think Section 4 or so of that law gives them power to look at money laundering, advanced fee fraud, miscellaneous offenses, and even terrorist financing. It has so many other laws that they coordinate, the criminal code, the penal code, and so forth. So they have a lot on their hands, just like we do. But, at times, these two streams, the red and the blue, do commingle. Just like if somebody steals public phones and launders that money, of course, EFCC may come in. So in such situations, sometimes we forward such cases back to EFCC, and in some cases, they too forward matters back to us. Then you mentioned when we arrest those traffic bribe takers, are we kitted? Like I said, we work with other agencies. We have the State Security Service, we have the Road Safety Commission, we have other security apparatus. We are not kitted. Of course, you don't go for a sting operation kitted, but those who cover us are armed. And of course, they indicate in their apron ICPC or DSS and some other appellations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, presenters. This was quite an experience. Let us give them another hand of applause, please. Thank you very much. We've learned a lot from this one. Thank you so much. You may go back to your seats. Okay. Yes, Dr. Roger, please. Come and take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for handling these three powerful presentations. I didn't expect anything less than that from you, Paul. So, Paulus, Noah, thank you so much for steering the chairmanship for this session. In fact, we're running out of time. So what I'm going to do is we're going to have one last presentation. It shouldn't last more than, I know Professor Edward can be very, very fast, maybe 20 or 30 minutes more, maximum. We're supposed to have tea break, but I'm not going to have the tea break now. After the 30 minutes presentation, when we finish, we can have, if you want, to have the break, whatever it is, there for us to enjoy. We enjoy them, we can depart. So without much ado, I think the chair for Professor Edward Hosea's presentation is the chair Ghana, CHRAJ. So Mr. Joseph Whittle, please come. And I know Prof is very efficient in presenting. If you give him 5 minutes, he'll do 5 minutes. If you give him 10, he'll do 10. So I'll leave it. I know how to manage my people. So thank you, Edward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope we've heard what Roger said. We shouldn't sleep. So this is the last one, and let's do the professor the honor of listening to him, because he's a store of knowledge. This morning we heard he is the best beach party preparer. But I can assure you, having been with the association for some time, he is more than preparing beach parties for delegates. He's a store of knowledge. He's a colossus of our association. And I'm very sure that is why the organizers have given him the conference theme to speak on. And I'm sure he will do justice to it. So on that note, I call upon Professor Edward Hosea. Please, you have 30 minutes within which to convince us that we are here
to do something critical on combating corruption for good governance and sustainable development under Goal 16. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. I think I'll spend less than 30 minutes because I understand the time that we have been here throughout the day. Protocol observed. I'm so happy to be here. I can see old faces and the new faces. I'll share with you, it's like a repetition. I'm going to do like a summary. I'm going to cover introduction, sustainable development goals, corruption diagnosis and challenges, linkage between corruption development, prioritization and the sequencing, example of a priority area, coordination, integrity, and the conclusion. As you can see in the introduction, we are saying corruption is a transnational phenomenon that affects our society, rich and poor. Corruption threatens development because of stability and the peace at stake. Corruption undermines institutions, values, and democracy, ethical values, and rule of law. Where there is no good governance, there is corruption. Countries who oppose corruption must come together, as we have come together, to tackle the challenge, the scourge, in order to prevent the inroads of corruption. Through UNCAC, for example, countries have been able to develop measures to prevent and combat corruption. When we talk of sustainable development goals, we all know we are talking about the global goals that were adopted by UN in 2015 as universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, ensure by 2030 all people enjoy peace and prosperity, no poverty, zero hunger, good, healthy, well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water, etc., etc. We all know what sustainable development goals. There are 17 SDGs which are integrated. They recognize that actions in one area will affect outcomes in others. And therefore, the development must balance socio-economic and environmental sustainability. Now, when we talk of challenges of corruption, countries must be committed to prioritize areas that they think is the most important. And I'm happy today, most countries that have presented their report, they have a priority area, which is very good. For example, we as anti-corruption agencies in Africa, we lead the process of preventing and combating corruption. So to me, I thought I should raise some of these questions. For example, to me, these are critical issues to consider, and we must find answers. One, we should be able to evaluate our country's experience in the fight against corruption. Are there gaps in our laws against corruption? Are the laws enforceable effectively? Do the anti-corruption agencies have sufficient resources and the skills? Are we able to retain skilled investigators and the prosecutors? Do our courts conversant with corruption offenses when they decide the cases? Now I want to talk a little bit about the linkage between corruption and the development. Are the anti-corruption strategies realistic? All countries have anti-corruption strategy. Are they realistic? Is there a political will that enhances the ability of anti-corruption agents to combat corruption? Does the peer review mechanism that is under the UNODC has helped state parties to clearly see where the problems are and how to fix them? We have conducted surveys over time to see the level of corruption in different countries. For example, Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, World Bank Business Environment Survey, Global Competitive Survey by the World Economic Forum, local NGOs equipped with the capacity to carry out the corruption diagnosis survey. Do they help to detect petty administrative and grand corruption? The results link will address development issues and how the citizens are affected by social service delivery and their impact on economic development. The extent to which the government, through anti-corruption agencies, guided on how to reduce the level of corruption and stimulate economic development in the country. We have had a number of good experiences from different countries which are very encouraging. We have had also quantitative data and how the data has been able to help different anti-corruption agencies to measure corruption. The right to information is very important so that citizenry can participate in the prevention and the combating of corruption. Now, one of the things that I want to emphasize is the priority and the sequencing. Corruption is a multifaceted problem that requires a comprehensive, multi-pronged approaches and solutions. Failure to prioritize the strategy document remains sterile, and therefore it is difficult to implement. Therefore, in selecting priority areas, one has to consider the following. One, the significance of the problem, the target area, the amount of harm does to the society and the citizenry. Secondly, the likely effectiveness of the proposed reforms in reducing the problem, the expected costs of the problem, the reform that you are putting in place, the issue of budgetary, economic, but political capital and technical capacity. Most importantly, is not the magnitude of the problem of corruption, rather the intended reform that reduces the problem that feed into development and society at large. Therefore, we as the anti-corruption agencies around the continent, we have to know how to prioritize and the sequence the issues that we put emphasis on. A good example is the education area. The UNESCO, UNDP, Transparency International have carried a number of studies, and it shows that corruption infects every level of education in insidious ways, from the sale of grades, to purchase of degrees, to demand of sexual favors in return for pass mark. Corruption undermines national development politically. To stamp out corruption in the education sector is more likely to draw support from the citizenry. This, for example, is a way of strategizing and picking an example and to see how that example as anti-corruption agencies, you can reduce the level of corruption. For example, as I will say, education. Coordination and the strategy. One of the challenges in the anti-corruption agencies is the question of coordination. How do we coordinate these strategies and how do we implement? Experience has indicated that you need a coordination authority that can impact on implementation of the anti-corruption strategy. Depending on the circumstances of which country, the coordinator must have this authority over the ministry, department, agencies of government to comply. If you are coordinating the strategy, the person who is coordinating must be in a position of authority that the reforms that you are making in your strategy should be implemented and complied. I've seen in some countries where the anti-corruption agency, though, is there, but it doesn't have the authority to impact upon MDAs. So here I'm calling upon that we should strategically ensure that the person who is coordinating, the authority that is coordinating, has the impact to prioritize and make sure that the reforms that we are advocating are implemented. There should be periodical feedback to the citizenry on what we do in terms of the prevention and the combating of corruption. For example, I'm suggesting here to have an anti-corruption forum that brings all stakeholders together, learn and respond to different reforms that have been recommended through your agencies. Failure to do so, you lack support from the public. As I conclude, I'm suggesting the following. In fighting corruption, you need integrity and ethics. We need the political will, not only political will, but political will with integrity. Political will with integrity. You may have a political will, but there's no integrity. Another thing that I'm suggesting to you, you may wish to consider the national integrity system. Countries must have the national integrity system. If you don't have a national integrity system, really the prevention, the enforcement we are talking about may not necessarily be grounded. You also need a sound public management system and the practices. We give a number of suggestions and reforms, but I'm suggesting to you that our countries must have sound public management system and a practice. We need the professionalism and the meritocracy. The working force that is there must have clear policies, laws that are just and enforceable. And finally, we talked about the prevention. They're all important: the prevention, enforcement, internal controls, educational programs. Parliament must be involved, the judiciary must be involved, private sector, media, civil society. They have a role to play to ensure that there is ethical conduct in the society. In conclusion, as I said, I'll spend a very few minutes. Corruption undermines development and is antithesis to good governance. Anti-corruption strategies are key to pursue the scourge of corruption. Partnership is very important. You need the public, you need the private sector, you need the civil society, you need the media, because all these are important. We cannot work alone, we need partnership. Reduction of corruption is inspiration to all humankind in order to realize the SDGs. So we have to prioritize, we have to sequence. For example, as anti-corruption, you can say, this year, we want to sequence and prioritize 3 issues. Because you cannot finish in a year. You have to prioritize to make sure that you have an impact. So periodic sharing of information and the priority interventions against corruption through anti-corruption annual forum is germane to engage and get the support of the citizenry. Finally, integrity, ethical values are the cornerstone for achieving sustainable development and a good governance. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Prof. I think we can do better than that. I promised you that the professor would do the linkage between combating corruption, good governance, and the SDGs, and he's done that. He's gone even further, and I don't want to attempt to dilute what he has done, but what comes across clearly is, one, we should prioritize as anti-corruption agencies. Prioritize our work, sequence our work, make sure we evaluate. Do we have the funds? Do we have the investigators? Do we have what it takes to carry out our mandate? It's very critical. And those of us who have strategies, please make sure the coordinating role is in somebody who has the authority to carry it through. And with those few words, I would thank Professor Edward Hosea and invite, I think we can, Roger, can we take 10 minutes? 10 minutes for us to ask any questions and clarifications or any commendations that you think you'd want to make. So can the mic move around and we take questions and the comments? Kindly show by hand so that I'll recognize your presence. Any person? Right. So, right in front, our chairperson of ACA.
Thank you very much. Son? Thank you very much, Professor, for your very insightful presentation, and Chairman, too, for allowing me to ask this question. My question is, we have been at this fight against corruption for a long time. as this association and many other associations outside the Commonwealth, international, regional, and even national. We are committed. We work hard. We have passion. We put in whatever we can. Why do you think, in particular, we've been informed by Roger that this particular institution is 12 years old. Why do you think that our efforts are not translating in reduction of corruption? Or do you think that they are? Thank you.
Very tricky and insightful question. Any more? Please. The professor would like to get Madam's last point, if you can clarify it for him, the last part.
I really, it was one question, that why do you think that in spite of all the efforts for decades at different fora, international, regional, even national, the commitments, the passion, the knowledge, the resource that we've put into fighting corruption, and in particular, this particular institution of the Commonwealth, of Commonwealth Africa, why isn't corruption coming down in spite of all that investment? Or is it coming down?
Any more hands? Right? I recognize right in the, please, on your left, my left. There's a hand there, second row.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I want to just endorse the suggestion of Prof. Corruption is varied, and from the conversation we've heard today and what we know, it could take an agency running up and down. You are everywhere and no impact. And I think the question asked by the last speaker underscores a disturbing concern. Say, are we even making progress? Ask the question the other way around. Without anti-corruption agencies, what would be the situation? To be far much worse. That's one. Two, society is organic. The subject matter we're discussing mutates and reflects in different ways. So by the time you think you are making an impact in one particular area, you are actually seeing an emergence in a different sector. It looks okay until you unearth what is there. So why do I say I endorse what Prof said? The resources will always be limited. The human capital will always be limited. The expectation of society will always be too high, and we don't manage expectations very well. So you find out that you need to communicate more, and we tend to do that. We say, look, you may have 1,000 petitions, but we're only going to look at 10. It's not as if wrong has not been committed, but if we pursue 1,000, you get 1,000 no results. You pursue the 10 that you can deal with, your budget, your human capital, your experience and all that, you are sure of where you are going to land. Once that communication is very firm, I think that people will begin to understand that this is not the failure of anti-corruption institutions generally, but a systemic challenge that we can deal with in other ways. And the last point, which I want to emphasize, I think that we need to come to terms with the reality that enforcement alone, as desirable as it is, will never, never work. Because corruption weakens the state, and it weakens all sectors of the state. I used the example of legal representation earlier on. There are other ways in which corruption weakens the state that we could replicate. So what that means is that you have to design measures that help you to prevent that from happening. Otherwise, the consequences will be catastrophic. You know, These are my additions to Prof. and to commend his very seminal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more? I'll take just one, the one in front, just here. Roger. I can overrule you as a chair.
Thank you, Gatulo from Botswana. I want to thank the professor for this illuminating presentation. The professor is an old colleague from back in 1997. We've been working together. Just to indicate that what we dissent from the professor's presentation is that corruption, the fight against corruption does not require a stand-alone approach. It actually requires multifaceted approach. But more importantly, I think the essence of his presentation is that what kills corruption almost instantaneously is integrity. And I agree with him very well. So just to commend the professor for that presentation. I don't have an answer. I don't have a question, but just to buttress the point that he has just made. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We now call upon the Prof if he has any answers or any comments to the comments. And you can do that in a very short while.
Yeah, I'll be very short. Thank you so much for the good question from the IGG Uganda. Your point is very, very valid. And if I may say, I've been a participant of many organizations like the current, like this one, the Commonwealth Africa Anti-Corruption Authorities. And I understand there were several other, like the Global Anti-Corruption Authorities, the UNCAC, the larger organization. Yeah. But as of now, if you ask me, I think the Commonwealth Africa Anti-Corruption Authorities has been consistent, has been there for the past 12 years, and they've been meeting regularly, and they have an agenda. In my opinion, you are doing very well, in my opinion. Other institutions like this one, they come and go depending on the leadership, depending on who is managing the process. To go straight to your question, if you look in terms of different indicators like Transparency International, like African Survey, and et cetera, there is a reduction of corruption. As you can see, the numbers are not static. If you pick, for example, Transparency International, in my opinion, there's a lot of improvement. And since there's a lot of improvement, the things that we've been talking here, they showcase to what extent Commonwealth Africa is improving. If you compare 12 years back, in my opinion, we are improving. What we should be doing, in my opinion, is to communicate more. We have to communicate the gains that we have achieved over time. For example, the report that comes out annually of this organization must be popularized around the world to see what exactly you are doing. There's a lot of innovations. There is a lot of concrete things that you are doing. What is important is for our leaders to be part of this process. If you are left here alone, people will see that corruption is still rampant. We need our leaders in Africa to showcase that they care, and the corruption is one of the priority areas. They only talk about corruption when they want to get elected. But once they are elected, corruption is no longer an agenda. So I'm challenging our heads of state and government that corruption must be a continuous agenda. If corruption, it has to go down. And we cannot just leave the anti-corruption agencies to do this job alone. That's why I talked about the coordination, the national coordination. You need the person who coordinates, or the authority that coordinates, has an impact. If we say ministry so-and-so, you have to implement these reforms, reforms must be implemented. We have challenges of compliance. Anti-corruption makes a lot of recommendations, but some of these recommendations are not implemented. And therefore, that's why I'm saying, at the top, we have to have people with integrity, people who can really walk the talk. If you want to clean the staircases, you start from the top. You don't start from the bottom. So if corruption has to be reduced dramatically in Africa, we need our leaders to be part and parcel of the anti-corruption agencies. So these are my views. And I agree with my brother, professor from Nigeria. You really nailed down the points that I wanted to emphasize. And finally, the issue of communication. How do we communicate with the population? How do we tell the population, this year we've been able to overcome ABC? So you need to have a good communication strategy. If you don't communicate, people don't understand what you're doing. And finally, corruption is everywhere. Corruption is everywhere. There's no single country there's no corruption. And when you fight corruption, in my views, you are fighting three factors. You are fighting people with power, you are fighting people with money, and you are fighting people with influence. And these people, they're always advanced than the anti-corruption agencies. Always remember that. When you fight corruption, corruption fights back. So we have to come with a strategy, a communication strategy that the population should appreciate what we are doing, and we are doing for the country, we are doing for Africa, we are doing for the whole world, that corruption is a bad thing. Thank you, my brother from Botswana. I have no comment. I appreciate your observation that you have made. And I thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the clap shows how we appreciate what you have done. And on that note, I call upon Roger to take his mic, since he's been eager to take over.
Thank you so much, Mr. Whittle, for warding me off. You are the only one who can stop me in my tracks. But thank you for such an insightful presentation, Prof. Thank you so much. So we have come to the end of today's session. I'm told that we're not going to have the tea break because we have proper meal to have. You don't want to waste your stomach. Tomorrow, we have one more session that we couldn't do today. So tomorrow we will start that section. And because we are having it in Zarina Hotel, it's going to be 8 o'clock sharp. We are starting first session tomorrow at 8 o'clock. So we should take note of that. And that session will be the impact of corruption on good governance in Africa by the CEO of Rwanda Governance Board, Dr. Usta. The rest I have to make a practice on the last name, just like how my name was also being crucified. My name is very simple, Corantin. It's not Corantan, it's Tin, T-I-N, like Clinton, Corantin. So take note. Anyway, they've been avoiding my name all the time, so everybody calls me Dr. Roger. Meanwhile, the same name they avoid. Your bus that brought you will be the same bus that will take you back to Serena Hotel. Take note of that. And the dinner is 7 p.m. at Serena Hotel. So from tomorrow going, everything is being held in Serena Hotel. So we are finished with KICC for today. We won't come back here again. So have a good evening, and thank you for a job well done. Let's give a clap for ourselves for having done so much today. Thank you all. Thank you. So we'll see you at 7 p.m. In Serena Hotel for the dinner, official welcome dinner. Thank you.